If you love Netflix's hit show Stranger Things, then you should head on over to Playhouse 46 at St. Luke's to Stranger Sings, the parody musical. Take a trip back to Hawkins, Indiana in 1983 when times were simpler, hair was bigger, and unsupervised children were getting snatched by interdimensional creatures. Now, if you want more adventures, thrills, pubescent angst, heavy synth, poor parenting, convoluted love triangles, cheap effects, dancing monsters, and most importantly, justice for Barb, this is the perfect musical for you. And hey, it's the best time to do it because the award winning production just extended yet again due to popular demand and will continue performances through April 30th. Now, the writer, lyricist, and composer for this hilariously funny show, Jonathan Hogue, joins me now. Jonathan, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Of course, always excited. So, Jonathan, let's go all the way back to the process of Stranger Sings for you. You started with two performances at Feinstein's 54 Below back in 2018. And now it's evolved into this full-blown production that we're seeing at St. Luke's. What about this show, when you were watching it, made you go, this would be a good musical?
Yeah, so it's funny because I grew up really obsessed with parody, satire. I grew up, Saturday Night Live, Monty Python. I was writing parodies of. I was an actor growing up and was writing parodies of shows that I was in for cast parties. So it was kind of like my little tradition. And I don't know. I always loved kind of taking something that I loved and I understood really well, and then finding a way to kind of flip it on its head or comment on it or do something kind of strange with it. Um, and so I was just obsessed with Stranger Things and was loving kind of all the content that was coming out on the internet with Justice for Barb and this whole kind of meta commentary of Winona Ryder. Is this her playing herself or is it a character? And so when season two came out in 2017, I was watching it and I was joking with my brother. I was like, this would be like the perfect parody musical. Like
Yeah.
Joyce is like the perfect like musical theater diva, and you could have this whole Justice for Barb arc. And the more I started kind of sitting with that, the more I was like, gosh, somebody needs to write this. Like, who's going to write this? And I was like, I have to write it, I guess. Like no one else is gonna do it. And and so yeah, it was just like this deep love for Stranger Things that I say love, it's really obsession.
There's a fine line. Yeah.
It has a chokehold for sure. So but yeah, and and I love like 1980s sci-fi movies, the
Mhm.
kind of nostalgia there. I love musical theater. And so it was just like Stranger Things as a parody was like the perfect conglomerate of like so many interests of mine, and it just kind of flowed out of me, which was really fun.
Yeah, no, I totally get where you're coming from. And that's something that I noted when I saw it, and I saw it with a friend who is like also obsessed with Stranger Things. I consider myself more of a casual fan. I watch it, I like it. I don't know if I'm obsessed with it, but I definitely enjoy it. And you hit a really nice balance of nice, really deep cuts while also still catering to fans who just, watch the show and enjoyed it. So what was that like finding that balance like of not going too deep into the nitty-gritty so anyone it's accessible to anyone to come see?
Yeah, that I one of my favorite compliments that I hear from people is I've never seen Stranger Things and I loved Stranger Things.
Mhm.
And I think and I credit the show itself to some of this because I do think that what makes the show so attractive to people is that it has this nostalgia. Like the story is really accessible. It gets convoluted, in a good way,
Sure.
by like season four when you've got like 15 different plot lines and whatever. For me, one, because I was writing it when season two had come out, I was really kind of honing in on that first season because I think there's so much that's iconic from that.
Yeah.
Joyce with the Christmas lights and Eleven with her Egos and the Demogorgon. It was like all of these things before it kind of like grew. That the story's pretty simple, and I was like, if I can just keep that as kind of like the common, like the thread to hang things off of, then I can really like reference anything I want as
Mhm.
long as people are able to follow what the main action is. And so that's what's been really fun is that I wrote it in 2017, 2018 when we only had season two, but then we've had seasons three and four come out,
Right.
and I haven't changed the core of the show or the structure of the show. It's always the kids trying to find Will out of the Upside Down and the
Right.
Demogorgons running around. But I've been able to kind of hang references from other seasons, like one of the scenes I rewrote to be at Scoops Ahoy, and
Mhm.
we've got running up that hill joke in the show now.
Yes.
So there's
Yes.
there's a lot of little nuggets that I'm like, if no one gets this except for like two fans in the audience, great. most people are getting the kind of core references or the asides, but at the end of the day, people are just following the main action, and that's always been the hope.
That's awesome. So one thing I do want to ask about, so obviously this is a parody musical, and something that happened just a few months back was with Barlow and Bear and their unofficial Bridgerton musical, which obviously treads in different waters than Stranger Things because that is not a parody; it is a retelling of Bridgerton, whereas yours is a very clear parody. Anyone who goes to see it knows that. Um, so is what is the nuances, and did you have to work with Netflix to get this approved to have a monetary aspect to it?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's yes, we're very different from Bridgerton. Under copyright law, there is basically a defense clause that's a defense of fair use. So you have a
Mhm.
fair use of the original IP, and so basically what it's saying is it gives writers the right to be able to comment on existing things in their own
Right.
way without actually being sued for copyright infringement. I think it's what SNL uses every weekend that they can do parodies of things. Um, but it's basically, it gives us the ability to take a certain amount of the original IP legally
Mhm.
while in order to comment on it and put it on its head. So if we were writing a Stranger Things musical that was not funny, obviously that would be a very different thing, and I think
Right, of
Netflix
course.
would be not happy about it. But because we're completely satirizing, we're completely turning it on its head, we're not doing the Stranger Things musical. It's able to kind of exist legally and freely. Which has really been fun. I think the challenge too that we've had is also in marketing. We have to look at we have the Stranger Things experience that's happening
Right.
in the city. It's like we're
Yes.
we're not that. We're not trying to confuse people. Like please go to the Stranger Things experience and have the best time because it's so cool, and then come see our show and laugh. It's like we're
Right.
we're not here to say like take a picture with it in with this couch with the Christmas lights and all, like we're not recreating the set. We're not trying to do anything. This is our version of Hawkins. This is our version of the Upside Down. Everything we do is satire of what Netflix is doing. It's so there's no confusion. I think
Right.
that's the
Yeah.
biggest thing.
Yes, it's highly familiar to the setting of Stranger Things, but yet still completely unique and still your own. That's
Yeah.
a obvious distinction to make, and it's very cool to see. Something my friend and I noticed, and obviously something that we grew up with, when we were in high school and middle school, was Star Kid, and we did get a lot of similar vibes. Were you inspired by that, or do you feel like you're in the same camp as that kind of field?
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. I Star Kid is like a huge part of my like writing aesthetic.
Hmm.
Obviously I've never written for Star Kid. But I grew up with Harry Potter musical. I grew
Yeah.
up with, all yeah, kind of their whole like early days classics. And it just like I think what they did so well is they were able to create this parody musical that was able to kind of have its own like weird deviations while also like having a heart to it. And I think that
Hmm.
was like important to me is that they weren't just trying to like write a bunch of little like Harry Potter sketches. They were actually writing like a musical, and like the characters that they created were very different from the ones in the movie, or in the
Right.
books. And yet they're like their own kind of, they have their own, through line, like Draco Malfoy is this like, wants to travel to Mars, it's just,
Yes.
it's like stuff like that that I'm like, this is so fun. Like I want to create my own versions of these Stranger Things characters. Actually, funny enough too, we had Jamie Lynn Beatty from Harry Potter musical was
That's awesome.
our Joyce for a little bit
Oh, great.
in October. So it's been really fun to kind of, connect with her on that. And she, just loves Stranger Things and just had a great time with us. And so I feel like we're, here to share ideas now with those folks. And yeah, it's done with love. So
That's so cool. Yeah, no, because it definitely hit us when we saw Papa come out and the dancing fluid moment, the long, like blonde white hair. I was like, that's Lucius Malfoy from a
can
very
I,
large sequel.
can I speak to that? That was completely our actor brought that. It is so funny
Really?
to me. Yeah, that whole journey, that character was so funny because so his name's Garrett Palladian was our original Steve Jonathan Dr. Brenner, and I wrote the character as this kind of like very kind of over dramatic diva character, but I
Right.
didn't think in terms of the dancing that he brought to it. I didn't even really make that connection, and then it don't really want to spoil anything, but it actually weirdly did fit into like the dramaturgy of
Yeah.
Eleven and his relationship. And then the other thing we were talking about the wig for this run because the last time we had just like a normal kind of, white Dr. Brenner wig. We were
Yeah.
talking about something long and flowy that's a very dancey, but the idea I was pitching was David Bowie in Labyrinth,
Yeah.
just the like the kind of weird mullet thing. And we were going for something like that, and then it ended up being this kind of very flowy thing that I was like, actually, this is something completely different and hilarious. And then later everyone was like, oh, it's Lucius. And I was like, oh, it is Lucius. That's hilarious. So it's a very funny like accidental reference there that
Yeah.
we've put in there, but it's part of the show now, so it's really fun.
It was an excellent part. I think that's a great addition to add into the show as like the mythos of the Netflix's universe expands. So speaking to that though, how much have you turned to the actors and went, okay, what do you think we should add into this, and how much free reign do they have to like add things in, without necessarily completely changing your original intention?
Yeah, I think that's always been the balance. The script is this a lot of what's happening in the show is in the script. I think there's little like jokes and asides that we found in rehearsal that we've like kind of left in our production, and now we're actually at the stage where we're doing multiple productions around the world. We had a London
Mhm.
production that ran for a couple of months. We have Australian production that opened in November. And so, we've been thinking about like what things are in our production that we're putting in the script for these other productions. And, there's a lot of things where it's just this production that we built in New York, the actors are bringing a certain quality to it that other actors won't necessarily.
Right.
I think Barb is a great example of we have a sequence that's kind of all improv really, but we've like set what that is.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of things that have been in there the whole time, and then there's a couple of things where we just kind of let the actors like find fun stuff, and then we'll lock it in. So and even now, there's just like little things. Like the fun part about being in the round is that there's so much audience interaction,
Right.
and so the actors really are playing off the energy of the audience that night. I mean, there's even little things with like whoever's sitting in the beanbag chairs that night are getting
Yes.
a different show. So so it's fine. It's been very collaborative. Our actress who plays Barb, Slee, she was in it at 54 Below, so she's been in it since the very beginning
Oh
and has
wow.
been, so we've been able to kind of build that character together, and it's
Yeah.
been, such a dream to have someone so collaborative and brilliant on the journey with us this whole time. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah,
Something my friend noted, and something I totally agree with, is that every actor is going at 110%. There's never a moment where someone's really outshining someone else, and they're all giving their all, and it shows. You can feel the equal level of talent and pleasure they all have to be on that stage. But speaking to playing in a theater in the round, we also noted that you guys really did a really nice job of balancing each side of the audience, because it's a square more so than a circle. And no one really ever felt unloved or left out during the performance. So how difficult was that when you were sitting there staging and like going through that, like to make sure that there was a balance? Because it's not a typical stage.
yeah, it was really new for us because we did a run of the show. It was the first time doing it in the round because
Mm-hmm.
the production we'd done before Playhouse 46 was at the Players Theater in the West Village, and that was normal proscenium house. So it was a very different show. So what's interesting is I go back and watch the videos of that production, and I'm amazed by how little people are moving. I'm like, there's no choreography in this number. What's going on? And I thought it was very dancey at the Players Theater, but the thing is being in the round, your characters have to keep moving,
Mm-hmm.
because if they're in one spot for too long, they're blocking someone or they're doing, and so our director Nick Plato and choreographer Ashley Marinelli, they really took the time to think through, not only how are we moving these characters through space, but also using that in the story. And so there's a number of songs in the show that from the Players Theater production to now are so much more fleshed out comedically with ideas because they were forced to keep the characters moving. So it's been really interesting and fun. And I'm glad to hear that everyone's feeling like it's a good show on all sides. People keep asking, they're like, where's the best place to sit? And I'm like, depends on what you want to see because you'll see
Everywhere.
something
Yeah.
new on every side. So
Yeah, no, I don't know if there is a bad seat in the house. That's what I was thinking about. But yeah, it was great. I don't think there was a side that was left out for any stretch of time during the production. So I mean, kudos to your whole team for that. I want to go back to the writing a little bit, because one thing my friend Rachel, who was with me, noted is that you balanced fan jokes and fourth wall breaks really well, but you didn't necessarily sacrifice the integrity of the story. And so, it was very easy to obviously, it felt like you were part of the show when they were doing a wall break, but the second they went back to interacting with each other, you were back to being an audience member. It didn't feel like you stayed in one place too long. So what was that like to balance those, again, the fourth wall breaks, really?
Yeah. I mean, it's really paying attention to the audience energy. Like, where are things dipping? Where are people responding most? And I think, especially with this production in the round, because again, when we were in the proscenium, we weren't rubbing up against elbows with the audience.
Right.
And so this production was the first time where we were really breaking the fourth wall more than we normally had. I think Barb has always been fourth wall breaking. Like, she's always
Mhm.
come through, enters through the audience. And but uh, but there's a lot of moments in the show now that we realize, like, this is part of what makes the show fun, is the fourth wall breaking and the interacting with the audience. And um, the space that we've built is naturally immersive because it's this 80s basement with all these tchotchkes on the wall and
Yeah.
everything. And so the audience walking in knows that they're part of the story. They're not watching a show that's far away from them. They're in the basement with the kids. They're imagining all of these worlds. I mean, we don't, other than the what's on the walls, like, the actual physical space doesn't have much set pieces because we're just
Mhm.
using lighting and smoke and little props and things to take us to all these different multi dimensions. And so
Yes.
that's, I think, what's been fun with the audiences is giving them those moments to really engage with the show, and then knowing when to, like, help them focus in on what needs to be focused in on, because I think
Yeah.
there's times for both, and we've been able to finesse it over time to really figure out where those moments are and where to, pull back.
Yeah. And yeah, let me just compliment the set design, the lighting design, everything about that. Even just the minimalist use of props and set pieces, fantastic. It never felt like there was too little or too much going on. So kudos to you for that. We are running out of time though, so I do want to ask the most important question that I have. How important was it for you to get justice for Barb in this show?
Oh, clearly it was the most important thing. That
It
was,
was.
yeah, yeah. No, I just thought, I mean, that was such a big takeaway from season one, was what happened to Barb, and
Yeah.
why did she get shafted so horribly with, like, no remorse? And then season two tried to, like, make up for it, and it was just like, anyway, it was one of those things where I was like, if I can write this really satisfying arc for Barb to come back, the fans are gonna love it, and I would love it.
Mhm.
And I knew that, not to spoil anything for anyone that hasn't seen it, but she gets her justice in the show in
She
the form of
does.
a particular number at later in the show. And I was like, what is the 11 o'clock number of the show? Well, it has to be her. So that was an early number for me to write. I was like, I know exactly what this needs to be. And it's a nod to a number of things, but it's a very musical theater moment, is all I'll say.
Yes, it
And
is.
definitely rips off of some very specific musical references that I think fit perfectly, which is very satisfying, and the audience loves it. So,
Mhm. Well, Jonathan, I want to thank you so much for your time. I want to thank you for coming here. I want to thank you for writing Stranger Things. It's a fantastic. Again, if you want tickets, you can go to Stranger Things website. You can find it at Playhouse 46 at St. Luke's. It's extended through April 30th. So make sure to get your tickets. Go once, go twice, go a million times if you can. Jonathan, thank you again so much for being here.
of course, thanks. I love talking Stranger Things and Stranger Things. So,
Yeah, this was
thanks
great.
for
And
having
thank you
me.
so much. All right, have a
Of
good
course.
one.